through, that we've had this incredible summit going on, that we've had incredible speakers, the array of people, their knowledge, their stories, they're inspiring. I have learned so much, and you know, it's so funny as I've gone through all this material, and I don't know if I said I'm Ray Luskin, the host of The Creative Activist. So hello again, and I'm just so delighted as I was reviewing everybody's transcripts tonight, and you know, and the richness of what I learned. You know, everybody's going to learn something different. We all come with a different perspective, and so you know, every day I send you a form to fill out, and hopefully you're doing that, where you ask, you know, what are 3 things you learned today, how are you going to apply it in your life, and 1 action step that you can take towards your dreams. I think it's really key. And if you don't know what your dream is yet, that's okay too. Maybe you're getting some ideas from all the people that that you've been hearing speak. And also, you know, if you need help finding out what that big dream is, you know, finding your creative voice, you can talk to me. I have a special program that I'm going to be offering at the end of this summit, and it's an opportunity to work closely with me, and that you can help yourself find your creative voice, find your passion, your calling, and know that you make an impact every single day, that there is a ripple effect. As you know, by just listening to the people on this call, their reach is far and further because of their sharing their stories. And I'm curious, you know, how are you using the summit? I have one woman who wrote in that she listens to 1 a day. She chose that, and she said, I just pick 1, and she almost uses this as a meditation, and she's just loved it. So everybody's going to be using the summit differently. And I also wanted to let you know that if you can't listen to everything live, you know, everything's up for 24 hours. And today we had Kathy Barbini in as an extra because there was a mistake with a glitch in the technology yesterday. So I wanted to let you know that she's still up and you can hear her. But if you can't find the time right now, but this material really resonates with you, maybe it's exactly what you've been looking for to heal an old wound, to reframe a story, to take your creativity to a new level, to find out what you can bring to your church or community or workspace is a social for social change, starting a social change organization. There's so many pieces to this that these people are so incredibly gifted and talented, and I know that you're getting a lot out of this because that's what people are telling me. So there's so much again, and what I started to say was there is a package called the Gold Package, and for $67 you get access all the time. You can actually download the interviews, keep them on your computer, listen to them when you want, and you'll get a copy of written transcripts. So if you're somebody who likes to have the written word in front of you, this is your opportunity. Really, when you think about it, it's less than $2 a day because you're getting all these extra bonus calls. You know, every night you're going to get the wrap-up call, and I have a few bonus calls for you along the way and some extra goodies. So think about, what would it take for you to invest in yourself? You know, this is your opportunity to be inspired, to find a tribe of like-minded people, to find out what other people are doing, you know, no matter what. We have people who are talking about creativity. We have people who are talking about, you know, as I realized as I went through it, and I'm making notes, you know, I have 4 people who are educators talking about education from preschool, you know, kindergarten all the way up and to adult education. And I've got people talking about disabilities in so many levels. So there's lots of material here, and there's going to be something that resonates with you. So I do want to get started tonight and just do a little bit of our wrap-up, and we sort of have our format. And for those of you who are listening later on, I really go over the 3 speakers, interject some thoughts of my own, some questions that I think you need to consider. I said at the beginning, make sure you get a journal for yourself, because this is a discovery session for you. This is your opportunity to dive deep into who you are, to align with your values, to find out who you are in the process so that you can answer the question, who am I? How do I want to use my gifts and talents? What is the legacy I'd like to leave? Whose lives do I want to touch? We have a lot of big questions to answer, and so I think the best way to start is to journal. So I'm going to give you a lot of ideas to think about as we go through the evening. Our first speaker, Shiloh Sophia. She has been working for over 20 years with women all over the world to bring their ideas into form through intentional creativity. She's a published author, poet, and artist, and I admire her so much. She's spoken at the UN 4 times on intentional art as a healing tool. She owns art galleries and teaches classes on visionary business, intuitive painting, and sacred practice. Her community of cosmic cowgirls serves up to 2,500 women a month. Shiloh stands firm in her commitment to protect and promote the right to of creative expression. And what was so interesting, and she said that when she was at the UN, 57 countries signed on to say that. In addition, it's an integral part of the protected human right to freedom of expression. Artistic and creative expression is critical to the human spirit, the development of vibrant cultures, and the functioning of democratic societies. Artistic expression connects all of us and transcends borders and barriers. So what do you think of that definition? I love the fact that they are actually, that 57 countries signed on to this. So I would love to hear from you. You know, you can write me, call in tomorrow night. I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are, because I had not heard this until Shiloh had mentioned it, and I was like, wow, yes, I loved it. So I know I have another book. I have 2 books, actually. One is The Creative Activist, Make the World Better, One Person, One Action at a Time. And my other one is Art from My Heart, a self-discovery journal. And I've used art personally for healing for many years, and I do say it is a birthright, and that is something that we all have. And unfortunately, just depending on the school situation and teachers and counselors and parents, it sort of got pushed aside, and so people stopped using their imagination and their creativity that they all had when they were young. So I love that this is now a protected right, and that it is part of everybody. And I think what I love most is it brings people together. Art has the ability to bring us together, to open up hearts and minds, to show us how we're alike rather than always differently. It can show us different voices, but at the same time the humanity that's within all of us, the love that's there that we all want. You know, everyone wants to be seen, heard, and understood. I think what I love, too, is she talked about her experience this last year when she went to the UN. I think it was in October or November. I can't remember when. But she uses ritual as part of it. Now, she did some research, and she had like this 40-page document to talk about intentional creativity and how it is, you know, help people around the world and global images and what it's doing. And she was there, and she said, you know what? We need ritual instead. And so she has something called the Red Thread. And she said it's worldwide, and it's based on a Chinese legend that says that those who are supposed to meet will be connected by an invisible red thread, and that they are basically shortening the distance and space-time until they finally meet. So she does these red thread circles and gatherings, and so she decided at the UN that she needed to do that. So she passed out string, and people connected, and they had to look at each other and talk about creativity. They wrote out their actual intentions for this conference that they were in, this women's conference, and you know, and they got to speak to each other. And she said it changed the whole nature of the conference. She said these are people who are highly sensitive. They do a lot of work, and they are touched by wounds and negativity in the world. And she felt like she had to give them another tool to work with this. And so she used this ritual. So I'd love to know how you use ritual in your own life. You know, there are religious rituals that we all participate in at some point in our lives, spiritual rituals, personal rituals. And, you know, whether it's, or even at school, think about it, you know, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, they're all rituals. And how do they affect you? You know, where in your life do you use intentionally, do you pick a ritual? One of the things that I've started to do, you know, and I, in the last couple of years, is have a ritual before I start work, and I light a candle, and I say a prayer, and I open myself to another source, and I ask God to make me a conduit of service, so that I can be on a hero's journey, that I am, representing what is the best in humanity, the best in me, and have the trust and faith to carry that out. And so I have that. I have other rituals, like before I start speaking, I put my hands on my hips and I do my Superman pose. Then I do my Wonder Woman pose where I cross my wrists, and then I spin around like Rocky. So, there are little things. Maybe, who knows what your ritual is. I'd love to hear about that. And I think it's really important because it tells you more about who you are. And maybe there's a ritual from childhood that's just you light up. Maybe it's, Christmas tree lighting or going to an Easter brunch or whatever it is. I'm Jewish and I love Passover. I love the Seder. I love the beauty of it, the story, lighting the candles, the family together. I love singing. So there are rituals in all aspects of our life. And there's a beautiful book on hidden rituals by Janet Atwood. She was my coach in teaching me how to be a passion test facilitator. And she and Chris wrote this new book, and it's called Hidden Rituals. And she's interviewed people all over the world and talked about the rituals they use in their lives. So if you're interested more in that. So going back to Shiloh, she talks about that we need to use poetry and painting as tools of resiliency. And she talks about the act of creation. It's a sacred practice of intention, mindfulness, imagination, and insight. So what about you in your own creative life? What about it? Do you feel that way? Are you just doing to do? Do you have an intention? Do you set one before you begin your process? I know a lot of times, there have been times where I'll bless my materials before I start to paint. There are other times where I'll just start painting, and I just go in with free flow and just say, I'm open to whatever. So it obviously changes, but I'd love to know about your creative process, and I think it's again another form of inquiry. And she poses we need to go into inquiry and how powerful questions are. And this is a reoccurring theme throughout the summit. So many people have talked about questions, but Sophia talked about a different question. What needs to be expressed right now? So when you're ready to dive into your art, what needs to be expressed right now? And I'm not going to tell you all the questions. I think she had 4 on this that were really wonderful. But I'd like you to listen to this for yourself, so I'm not giving it all away. So, again, think about that. We also had a conversation about the space. That sometimes we need space between a project, before a new image may emerge, a new vision. And she talks about that space, those moments. And a lot of, many times I used to say this void. And she said that void is really a healing and fertile time. And I said, wow, I had not thought about that. So again, what is it for you when you've had those moments, especially those transitional moments when you've had a child go off to college and all of a sudden you're an empty nester, or you had a serious breakup and you lost your spouse or your best friend and you were alone. What was that time for you? Was it fertile? Was it healing? Or was it just a moment, I can't wait to get through this? So think about those things. I thought those were all really valuable experiences that we need to think about. And she talked finally about love, really, and the power of the feminine, the love at an energetic level. Everything is being impacted by our presence, she said. What a different way we'll walk in the world and what a different way we'll create if we know we're actually moving particles around and actually increasing the love inside of our field, and then that extends out into the world. I think I'm going to leave you on that note with Shiloh. I hope that you're taking notes, and again, go back and listen, because there's so much more to this conversation. I was just pulling out some of the highlights for me, and your highlights are going to be different, as I said before. Our second speaker and guest was Elizabeth Adler. And I love the fact that she's actually in Chicago. I haven't met her yet in person. And I had a wonderful intern this summer who said, Ray, I interviewed this woman for an article I did at Columbia College, and I think you'd really find her interesting. So I looked her up, and I was like, oh, I do. And so I pursued her, and we had an opportunity to talk. Elizabeth is a multidisciplinary artist and the executive director and founder of Chicago Dance Theater with a Z. It's an ensemble performance with a purpose. And, of course, I love that. You know, it was not just a dance company. It was a company with purpose. Her company provides multi-sensory dance theater experiences. In addition, they provide innovative, educational, artistic enrichment programs in Chicago to improve literacy and the awareness of the arts. So I'm like, wow, I love this girl. So at the beginning, we talked about her journey. You know, when she started her company, she was 26 years old, and we talked about her evolution as a leader, some of the things over the last 15 years that she's learned, and that, you know, the legacy she'd like to leave. So those are some of the little things we talked about. But there are two sections I want to concentrate on today. And one of them, I asked her, so who inspired you? You know, what is all this about? And she said, well, I always loved to dance. I started taking classes, you know, piano when I was little. I wanted to be involved in theater. And I did this as a kid, and it was my outlet. It's what I love to do. And she said my parents, they did a lot of activist work as well. Her father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 3 years before she was born and was also a Marine. So her parents, growing up, they did a lot of fighting for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and she said they fought to have MS covered under the Veterans and Disabilities Act because there was a doctor who started linking PTSD with MS. So she said she grew up understanding what it had to do in order to make a change in the world. So that's why she brought dance and the arts and that love of it to activism. So I'm wondering, what about you? Do you have an experience? Was there something that happened in your life that brought you to activism? Was there some experience that was similar? You know, I mentioned this before in another call that in my family it was modeled to me, philanthropy, being involved in community, and I saw that all the time. And I grew up with that, and I always thought that was the way of the world, and I realized it wasn't. But the other thing that it came to mind for me, now MS, they talked about that, and that I'm really wonderful, but think about it, 20 years ago, cancer was a secret. It was a horror, and you never talked about it, and, you know, you kept that secret at home, and the same thing, I was sexually abused. Well, any secrets, anything bad that happened in your family was, you know, you kept it at home, you know, sort of like the Vegas thing, whatever happens in Vegas stays here. Well, when anything that happens stays in the family. So how do you become vocal, you know, when it's been hidden at home? What, you know, and you know, I know for me it was like, you know, you got to keep secrets. What are the dirty little secrets we've kept all these years? And all of us have secrets. And the question is, you know, did you ever tell somebody? Did you not tell somebody? Maybe it was a friend but not your family. What about it? Think about, how do you feel if you were going public with something like being sexually abused? I know I had my own issues about that. It's like I didn't want to hurt anybody, embarrass anyone. I wanted everybody to be dead, you know. I was afraid I wouldn't believe. They would think something was wrong with me. People would hate me. So there's a lot of things that go on when you have to expose a deep, dark secret. And I'm just curious if any of you have had that experience. Again, it's something to journal about. You don't have to get stuck in the stories. It's just to make you thoughtful. Now, then Elizabeth, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. So Elizabeth and I had a conversation about, there was a program that I had read about, they did a dance program called, it was about domestic violence, and it was called Bindis and Bruises. And so I asked her about that because that intrigued me. You know, I always like to figure out there are new ways to tell stories, so we touch people in different ways. We educate them. They make them aware of things that they might not want to talk about that are uncomfortable. And so she was telling me she was teaching at Columbia College at the time, and one of the students came up and said, I'd like to choreograph a piece. She was from India, and she talked about having been sexually abused. And it was interesting because Elizabeth started talking. She'd actually been to India and taught there and spent some time there, and they started having this conversation, and she realized she had a secret. She had never told her family. She told her friends that she'd been in an abusive relationship for a number of years, but didn't ever come forward. And she used this piece of dance to do that. Well, what I loved is we talked about her collaborative process of bringing the dance to reality, not only with this woman, but bringing in a dance therapist, making sure they had the facts right. You know, they had a certain number of dancers involved. And they wanted to tell the story that 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted. So how do you do that in a way through dance, you know, and stuff like that? And you'll have to hear more about how she talks about this because I found it fascinating. Obviously, I'm not a choreographer, but I love to watch So You Think You Can Dance, and I love the way they tell stories in very short periods of time. So they invited a dance therapist in. They brought rape counseling agency in because they wanted to make sure this piece, because it could be a trigger for people. So they had therapists on staff while they were putting together, and to make sure they were handling the issues correctly in a way that, you know, would empower people rather than disempower them. And then also like a talk-back session. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to one. I was at one. I've been at several now, but the very first one I think I went to, there was a play about grooming on the internet, and it was done by David Schwimmer, the guy from Friends. He had produced this play, and it was done at the Looking Glass Theater in Chicago. And they had therapists on staff because so many people were coming forward and saying, oh my God, that's me, this is my family, this is something. And so I think that's a really powerful way to bring community together, to align people, giving them the information they need right on the spot, making sure people feel safe and comfortable. So I think you'd want to listen to this and find out more. Then we talked about the legacy she'd like to leave, especially her programs for kids. Their initiative actually handles 5,000 kids a year. And they have all these different wonderful programs, you know, one on literacy, but it's how they use their bodies, how they move, and how they build self-esteem, you know, using their bodies. And she said it's like, she loves working with kids. We plant seeds and we water seeds with the kids, and hopefully maybe the boost of self-esteem will make them help them make a different choice down the line, or maybe if they're struggling with reading or other literacy components, then maybe they'll have a boost of self-esteem, so they'll think, well, I actually was able to understand this, and maybe I just learned differently. And she wants kids to learn about failure and not to be afraid of it. And she talked about a new word that I guess is a buzzword among the artists and the educators, is developing grit with these kids, so that, you know, you do something multiple times through repetition, and that's how you get grit. And so I loved our conversation, and I think it's really important. There will be a few other people who are talking about educational components to their organizations and the work they do, because they are our future, and we need to give them the tools to help them be the best they can be, to be their most brilliant, magnificent selves, to feel empowered, to feel that they can make a difference in the smallest of ways. So I want you to listen to Elizabeth. You're going to love her. And she also wanted a few ideas about brainstorming. So one I'm just going to throw out to give you an idea. And she says when we're working on something, she said, I'll draw a big circle, and in the middle I'll say, so what's our big idea? And then she lets everybody add to it. And then she'll take home the notes, and then she'll play with them. So again, there's a little something for everybody in this conversation. And our final speaker is Heidi Bash Harrod. Now, Heidi is a human rights activist and the executive director of Women's Voices Now, a women's rights organization that utilizes film and the power of story through an online platform to advocate for the voices of women who are calling for political, cultural, social, gender, economic rights. Well, there are many reasons for human rights abuses and the problems that we face in the world. Women's Voices Now believes that it's the status of women that has to be improved in order to create a better place for all of us. So I love talking to Heidi. And she talks about some practical things, the challenges of funding, the value of collaboration and partnership, importance of messaging, and her vision for change. But I loved talking to her first because we talked about who inspires her. And oftentimes it's a hero. It's somebody out there. It's like, oh my God, it's Abraham Lincoln, or it's Oprah, or somebody like that. But she talked about the everyday woman in her life. And she said, that's my mother who takes care of my daughter when I'm working, and also my grandmother. When I see how women, in spite of the challenges that we have as mothers or as professionals, or the various roles that we take on where we have to be very creative and resourceful in managing all these roles that we play, so I'm asking you, who are the women in your life who inspire you? I had an event in March called the Women Who Dare event, and I asked that question, who inspires you? And many people said, my children, and my daughter who was there said, I did, that her mom, me, and I started to cry. It was just so powerful because, you know what, that's why I do this work. I want to be a role model for my daughter and my granddaughters. I want them to know they can do and be anything in this lifetime, and that they have a calling. We all have a calling, and that, and we have to find out what our unique gifts are and talents and bring them forward. That I do believe we have a responsibility to help every generation to be better and to make the world a better place. So we went on, and in our conversation, Heidi and I, and we talked about, who else inspired you? And she said it was a book. It was The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen. It was a story about a 12-year-old girl who at her Passover Seder opens the door for Elijah and finds herself transported back in time in Poland in 1941, and she's about to experience the Holocaust. And she said that book just had such an impact on her. She went home and she started talking, and she found out her grandfather was a survivor. And she asked him to come speak to her school class. And she said it was so profound, to have him and to talk. And so it reminded me to think about what book inspires you? Is there one that's just turned your life around? And what was that? And what was it about? Was it a biography of someone? Was it fiction? Was it a personal development book? What ideas? Maybe there's 1, 2, or 3 books that just made you think differently. So think about what those might be. And then I also thought about my family. When you're talking about Holocaust survivors, now many people have seen the movie Schindler's List, which came out a number of years ago. And from that, they started. Steven Spielberg started something called the Shoah Foundation. And the Shoah Foundation has collected stories, of the lives of Holocaust survivors because they're all dying. There isn't going to be an oral testimony of these people very soon. So he started this foundation and collected it. And I know several people, including my brother-in-law's mom, who then became part of a movie that they had about, she was a group of children that was brought to the United States by a family from Philadelphia. So think about it. Is there somebody you want to talk to who's older? Maybe they have a story that you wish you had asked about. I know my mom died last year, and now I just wish I'd spent more time asking her about her childhood. What was it like to grow up in the Depression? We spent a lot of time in the present, but not in her early childhood, and there is no one else to tell those stories anymore. That generation is gone. So who is it that you'd like to talk to in your family, your friends, somebody that you would like to have a conversation, and what would you want to know about them and about their life? I want to explain what Women's Voices Now does a little bit. It's a women's rights organization that utilizes film to advocate for the voices of women who are calling for political, cultural, social, gender, and economic rights. They have an annual online film festival where they gather films. They're submitted from all over the world, and they have a month-long voting period where there are viewers from all over the world watching these films, and then they submit their votes. They have a professional judging panel that determines which filmmakers are going to win the prize money. Then after they pick a few films that were remarkable, and they actually arrange and curate screening packages for them. They try and get out into the world where, there are other people who need to hear these stories about refugee centers, women's rights organizations, and they share these packages. And I love that model. It's using what's out there today in a big way, and and the connection internationally and globally that we didn't have years ago. We didn't have the internet. You didn't have Skype. You didn't have FaceTime and all these things that you could connect with people all over the world. So I love that. And one of the questions we got into, because she lives in the LA area, is, women being underrepresented in the film industry. And, this year, if you watch the Oscars at all, this was the big story, that women weren't represented, different groups weren't represented, blacks weren't represented enough, and things like that. So I'd love, what are your thoughts on that? And what can they do about it? Should they be doing something about it? That's something to think about. Is that something you care about? And is there a group that you feel is underrepresented that maybe you can be a voice? What I love is she talked about that they try and give you ideas. So let's say you see a movie on sweatshops in Bangladesh. And what do you do when you're done with the movie? It's like, oh, my God, I want to do something, but you don't know what. So they are also trying to give you, as she said, hold hands with you and give you some ideas about who to contact, maybe sign a petition. And so this is wonderful. And it's just, there are some books out there that do that as well, and there's some online resources that give you ideas how to do that. And I think that's something to think about. When you find something you care about, you have to figure out a plan to advocate for it, and what will be the most effective way for you to use your voice and your vision to make that difference. I think one of the biggest things she talked about, she said, so when you're in the game of activism, it's a lifestyle. It's not a season. It's not a newspaper article. It's not a campaign. It's a way of life, and just remembering that what we do does matter. What we say absolutely matters. How we behave to the people in our lives is crucial, because they also get frustrated by, I think, people who identify as activists. They don't have time for the ones that they love or simple things in life. I mean, that's like the best way to become burnt out. So I think there were a couple big things in those statements. One is it is a lifestyle, and I think we have to be patient as activists. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Change may take longer, and we have to find ways to be okay with that. And maybe it isn't your part to see the end result, but maybe it's your part to actually initiate change or be in the middle of it and contribute to it, but you may not be at the end of it and see all of it in your lifetime, and you have to be okay with that. Think about women's rights. We haven't had the vote all that long, right? And here I'm really happy we're having a woman run for president, but it takes time, and that's what we have to recognize. There are female prime ministers all over the world right now, and think about it. I think it was Switzerland was the last country to allow women to vote, and that was like 1975. That's just not that long ago. So it is a lifestyle. And I think the other thing is about recognizing that we don't want to burn out, and what can we do to stay healthy, strong, and that goes back to self-care, which has been a recurring theme over and over. How do we take care of ourselves in the process of making a difference for ourselves, for our family, for our community? We have that responsibility on all levels. So what is the vision for you? What's your vision for your family, your community, and the world? Again, go back, listen to these. You can listen to these over and over, and each time you're going to find something else that says, aha, that's my aha for today. So I hope you enjoy that. And I wanted to share my video for tonight. It's called It's Up to You, and it's going to take me a minute to set it up, but please listen. And when you get a chance, watch it on YouTube. Hold on a second. I'm coming. Takes a moment for the computer to warm up. Here it goes.
Every passing minute is another chance to turn it all around.
Never believe a prediction that doesn't empower you. How many predictions have been thrown at you your whole life? If you believe predictions that do not empower you, you will wither away and die. Either physically die or your spirit will die as you just walk around the world like a carcass, just following the map. You will be given a lot of titles in your life. You will be told so many different things. You must only listen to that which empowers you.
And see, it's not important how long you live. What's important is how you live.
The first thing I believe you got to do to turn yourself around is really take control of your mind. More specifically, you got to feed and strengthen the mind.
Guess what? You're going to make some mistakes. So the person who's never made a mistake hasn't done anything. And you're going to make some mistakes if you want to do something out here. You're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to be criticized when you come out into the arena called life. You're going to feel awkward and stupid and dumb sometimes. It goes with the territory. But it's okay.
Take charge of your own life. Then walk away from the 95%. Don't go where they go. Don't do what they do. Don't talk like they talk. Develop you a whole new language. Don't use their vocabulary. Don't use their excuses. Once you look back on it, you will never turn back. You'll never go back to the old ways and the old language and the old neglect. Never.
Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. Discharge your duties faithfully and well. Step by step you get ahead, but not necessarily in fast spurts. But you build discipline by preparing for fast spurts. Slug it out 1 inch at a time, day by day. And at the end of the day, if you live long enough, most people get what they deserve.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed that. I know I love listening to it. And some of the things that came up, don't follow the masses. Only listen to those who empower you. It doesn't matter how long you live, but how you live. You're stepping into the arena called life. You will make mistakes. Take charge of your own life. So this is Ray Luskin of the Creative Activist. And if there's anybody who has any final comments, I'd love to hear them. Okay, it's a quiet group tonight. So I am so happy and delighted you've all been on these calls, and it's been an amazing day, and I look forward to another one tomorrow. Thank you. Good night.